Okay, so let's continue with our video. So this is not the continuation, but it's a new video series of our MCQ questions, and we are going to cover uh, some MCQs which are on the exam topics website, and these are related to the AWS Certified Developer Associate exams. So we are going to see all the questions what are available on the exam topics website, and we will go through all the explanations one by one. So maybe because there are a lot of questions, more than 200 300 questions, which is impossible to cover in a single video, so we are going to create a multiple parts with some 10 15 questions per video. So let's read the question. A gaming website gives users the ability to trade games items with each other on the platform. So there is a website, just a gaming website, and some there are users, and users trade with each other. Like in a game, generally users buy some character, buy some tokens, some kind of things. They sell some tokens, they sell some characters. So on the gaming, or they purchase some games. So they are like doing some trades. The platform requires both users' record to be updated and persisted in one transaction. So it means, so let's suppose there is a gaming website and there is a user one and user two. If user one sell the record and user two purchase the record, so what they want is both the user records to be updated in a single transaction. It means if the user one sell something, then user one database has been updated. Plus, if user 2 buys something, the user 2 data also has been updated in a single transaction. It doesn't mean if user 1 sells something, user 1 data has been updated, but when the user 2 try to buy that, it fails, and so it's inconsistency, right? Because the debit transaction has been done from the user 1, but it's not going credit into the user 2, right? So they said both the user record to be updated and persisted in one transaction. If any update fails, the transaction must roll back. So if any of the transaction will fail, it will roll back. So which AWS solution can provide the transactional capability that is required for the future? So they said Amazon DynamoDB with operation made with consistent read parameter set to true. So they said, okay, can we use Amazon DynamoDB? Maybe we can use Amazon DynamoDB. Uh, but they said with the consistent read parameter here we are going to update. So but here they said consistent read parameter, so this is wrong. Second is imagine elastic cache. Elastic cache is just an in-memory database, right? So in memory, generally when you are doing some transactions, you should not use the in-memory database, you should use some persistent database, right? So this is also wrong. Third is Amazon DynamoDB with read and write made by using transact operation. This could be one of the option. Amazon Aurora MySQL with operation made with transaction block. This also could be one of the option because this is a SQL database. Amazon Athena with operation made with a transaction block. So this looks wrong because Athena is a like a service which is going to do some query on the S3, but it is nothing related to the S3. So only option is C and D, but we have to select one. So shall we select DynamoDB or shall we select Aurora SQL? So Aurora MySQL we generally use for the relational database when we have to use some kind of a joins. DynamoDB is just a NoSQL database when the database is we don't need any kind of a joins, and there is a flexibility in the schema we need. So when there is a gaming website now, so in the gaming website generally we need some flexibility, and there is not a huge kind of like joins. So C is the correct answer, and both the option uh, anyhow perform acid properties. So if both the transaction will run fine, then it's updated. Otherwise, if any of transaction will fail, it will be rolled back. So C will be the correct answer. So C. So if you go to the discussion tab, so why we are like why I am explaining this question, because if you see as I reveal the answer, it says correct answer C, but 38% said D. So generally, this website, the questions are great, but people get confused which one is the correct answer. So I am also like telling you the answer based upon my knowledge. So if you go to the discussion tab, here I have updated my answer with explanation. So example, imagine DynamoDB is strong, consistent read. It is eliminated. Elastic cache, it suggests a key value store. So eliminated. Athena is for S3, eliminated. DynamoDB transact operation, it could be one of the answer. And Aurora DB also support ACID properties, but uh, for the gaming platform, we focus on the trading game, which is a straightforward workload. So we might necessarily not need the relation database, right? So no SQL is generally prefer. So C is the correct answer. Okay, so let's go question number two. A developer has created a Java application. So there is some website, a Java or website or whatever application that makes HTTP request directly to the AWS service. So there could be any AWS service, S3, DynamoDB, any AWS service. So your application is calling the AWS service. So you can call AWS service using many ways, but this application calling using HTTP. And application logging shows 5xx HTTP response. So here in this case, Java application is a client, AWS service is a server, because client is making the request to the server and application is getting 5xx response. 5xx means either 500 or 501, this kind of HTTP response. So 5xx generally response at the server side error. There is something wrong with the server. So in this question, Java is your client, AWS is server. So it means server is giving 500 response, or you can say 5x's response to the client, and not regular but irregular intervals. The errors are affecting user. How should the developer update the application to improve this thing? So they said revise the request content. So it's not something related with the request content, because uh, it says irregular interval, because if the request is wrong, we have something passing bad data in the request, because HTTP is a transfer protocol. We have to send some request and we get some response. If we are sending some bad data, then every time we should get 500 response rather than just some irregular interval. So this is wrong. They said use AWS SDK for Java. So they said instead of the HTTP request, better use AWS SDK, like example Boto 3 for the Python. Similarly, like they said better use SDK. This could be the answer. Scale out the application so more instances are running. So this is not the answer, because you said scale out the application means Java. You said increase your client application, but issue with the server end, correct? Because 5x is something the issue at the server end. Add additional logging. Even if you add the additional logging, you already add some logging facility, because application log shows this. Additional logging is helpful, but it's not going to resolve the problem, right? So the correct answer is use the AWS SDK. Why? Because when you say HTTP, you have to put some your inbuilt logic. If I get 500, I will give a retry. But SDK will provide some kind of like retry mechanism automatically. So B is the correct answer. So if you go here, so B is the correct answer. Question three. A global company has a mobile app. So there is a company which has mobile app with static data. So mobile app some images. So that is called a static data, and that data stored in the Amazon S3 bucket, and that bucket resides in the US East 1 region. Right? Okay. The company serves the content through an Amazon CloudFront distribution. So we know like why we use the CloudFront distribution. CloudFront is just to reduce the latency, so that people get the response earlier. Generally, the static content or dynamic content from the S3 or some HTTP endpoint will be served using CloudFront. So they are also using Amazon CloudFront. The company is launching the mobile app in South Africa. So now the company has the mobile app somewhere, and they are serving using the mobile app. So let's suppose the mobile is just to display the images, and it is displaying the images from the S3 bucket, which is in the US East one. Now company wants to launch your mobile application in South Africa. but the company wants the data must reside in the South Africa region only. So if the data should reside in the South Africa region, it means the bucket should be in the South Africa region, right? All right, so the bucket should be in the South Africa region because that's why only the data will be in the South Africa region. The company does not want to deploy a specific mobile client. So the company said, I am not going to create a different mobile application because there is a one application whose backend is this S3 bucket. There's another application whose backend is uh, the S3 bucket which resides in AF South 1. So they said, I want only one mobile application and you have to implement something if the user at the South Africa trying to access the request, then the data will be served using this bucket. Other, if the user is from any other part of the world, the data will be served from this bucket. So how you are going to implement this? Use the CloudFront geographic restriction to block access to users. So they said just block the access, but this is wrong. We have to give the access to the South Africa user. So it's totally wrong. Create a lambda edge function. So what is lambda edge? So lambda is a normal lambda function. Edge. Edge means corner, right? Something at the corner, right? So lambda edge is a function which is used in the cloud front. So when you are trying to access something using cloud front, before even going to your backend, like in this case, backend means S3 bucket, you can implement some function so that the request is you as a client, you are trying to access the cloud front. Now cloud front is trying to access your backend, let's suppose S3. In between, you can implement lambda function. All right. So create a lambda function, associate the lambda function as an origin request trigger with the cloud front distribution to change the S3 origin region. This looks correct because we have one mobile application. Let's suppose you created one mobile application. Now you have to put some kind of logic, some if else condition logic. If the users are from South Africa, root uh, get the data from this bucket. If the user are from some another region, get the data from this bucket. So there is only one mobile application. So you have to put some kind of function. Function is lambda, and where you have to put as soon as the request come and before reaching to the bucket. So that is using the lambda function, and you can change your origin request. Origin means from where the data is coming. That is the bucket, or your origin means from where the data is being served. See, create a lambda function which looks correct. Associate the lambda function as a viewer response trigger with the CloudFront distribution to change the S3 origin data. So this looks wrong because they said associate the lambda function as a viewer response. So this option says that like when the request is coming, at that time you implement the lambda function so that it will go to particular S3 bucket and then serve the content. And this said viewer means when the request come to the CloudFront directly go to the S3 bucket, which is US East one. And when the data is going to come, at that time you will implement the lambda function, which is wrong because the data already you have picked from the US East one region. Right, so this looks wrong. Implement AF South one alternative CNAME. So this is totally wrong. So the correct answer is B. Okay, question number 4. A developer is testing an AWS Lambda function. There is some AWS Lambda function, and a developer is testing using SAM CLI. So they are running some CLI command, a serverless application model. The application that is implemented by the Lambda function makes several AWS API calls by using the AWS SDK. So Lambda function is written in some language, and they are calling some API calls to some of the AWS services, right? The developer want to allow the function to make AWS API calls in a test AWS account from the developer's laptop. Right. So the developer want to test that Lambda function using their local machine and in a different AWS account. Right. So what should the developer do? So how they are like, because if they have to go in some other AWS test account, they have to change profiles, credentials, something, right? Uh, they have to do something. Otherwise, by default, maybe they are trying to access the actual production or some other AWS accounts. So what settings the developer should do? Edit the template.yml file and add the access key, secret key in the global section. So this looks wrong. Template.yml generally is to create CloudFormation template is generally to create the resources, and anyhow, by any ways we should not hard code these secrets anywhere. Add a test profile using the AWS configure command using profile option, then run AWS SAM in local invoke command with the hyphen F profile. This looks correct because we are running using the SAM CLI. So if you have to invoke the Lambda, the command is SAM local invoke. So SAM local invoke. And now if you just normal SAM local invoke, uh, it could invoke any Lambda. But we want to run on test AWS account. So you will configure two profile. One is maybe actual production and one is test profile, and you will call using hyphen hyphen profile option. Edit the template YAML file and set the role of IAM. So why should we use the IAM role when we have to run locally? Run the function by using SAM local invoke command, which looks okay. Override the access key parameter by using hyphen hyphen parameter override option. This looks wrong because parameter override option we generally pass in the CloudFormation template. So correct answer is B. Question number 5. A developer designed an application on an Amazon EC2 instance. So some application they are running on Amazon EC2. An application make API request to S3 bucket, which is fine. Which combination of steps will ensure that the application make API request is the most secure manner? And we need to choose two options. So if your application is running on EC2 and from EC2 you want to access any other service, what should you do? You should create some IAM role, and that IAM role should have access to the particular AWS service. So in this case, S3 bucket. So create an IAM user. Totally wrong. We should not create an IAM user because if one service is trying to access another service, we should use the role rather than the user. So A is wrong. Create an IAM role which looks okay. That has a permission to the S3 bucket. Yes. Create an IAM role to an instance profile and attach that role to the S3 instance. Let's correct. Create an IAM role that has the permission to the S3 bucket. Assign the role to the IAM group. Wrong. We never assign the role to the IAM group. We assign users to the group. D is wrong. Store the credentials in IAM user in the EC2 instance. This is totally wrong. You should never expose your credential in the EC2. So B and C is the correct answer. Question 6. A developer is configuring an Amazon CloudFront distribution for a new application to provide encryption in transit. So a developer is configuring an Amazon CloudFront distribution. So we know Amazon CloudFront distribution why we use for the low latency, all right? And they have some application, and the developer is configuring Amazon CloudFront distribution, and but they want is the connection should be like secure, like encryption should be enabled in transit. The application is running in the EU West 1 region, which is fine. The developer creates a new certificate in the EU West 1, okay, but the certificate is not visible. So if you have to do some kind of encryption, you have to attach the certificate, right? But they said when I created the certificate, it is not visible to me. So let me show you. If I go to the cloud front, and if I create a cloud front distribution, so here I think you can attach some kind of a certificate as well. So custom SSL certificate. So if you see, you can attach the certificate here, right? So you can attach the certificate. But if you see which certificate, so this certificate, I am attaching A23CB, starting with A23CB. All right. So in which, and they said like, because they said it's no, they have created the certificate, but when they are creating the CloudFront distribution, this certificate is not visible in their drop down list. Why it's not visible? The the problem is this certificate, if you see here, it's clearly mentioned the certificate must be in the US East 1 region. It's clearly mentioned here. Doesn't matter where you like going to create a CloudFront, because CloudFront is a global service, global service. It's not a region specific service. So this certificate should reside in the US East 1 if you want to make it visible. But in this case, they have created a certificate in the EU West 1 region. That's why it's not visible here. So what's the solution? The solution is the developer has to create the certificate in the US East 1 region. So let's look at the option. So create the certificate in the same region, which is application, which already there. It's look wrong. Create a certificate in the EU West 1 region, wrong. Recreate the cloud distribution in the same region, wrong. Specify the ACM certificate name as the default root object. Root object means like because CloudFront said that okay, this is the root object. So root object means like whenever someone is trying to access that particular URL, what thing they are able to see like index.html page. This looks wrong. So none of the option looks correct, right? But if you, I think there is a typo in this question. If you, not in the question but in the answers, I think here create the certificate in the US East 1 region. So here US East 1 region. If you just put here US East 1 region, then it's correct, because create the certificate in the US East 1 region. Ensure that the alternate domain name in the distribution setting matches the domain name in the certificate. So this looks correct. B. But if you go through the description, people said that there is a typo. Otherwise, none of the option is correct, right? And I have shown you on the AWS as well. Let's go to question number 7. A developer is building an application that runs behind an application load balancer, which is fine. So you have the load balancer, and like request is coming to the load balancer, and then load balancer to the application. And ALB is configured as the origin for the CloudFront distribution. Okay. Users will log in into the application by using social media accounts. Okay. How can the developer authenticate user? Okay, so you have the users. Users will go to the CloudFront. CloudFront will go to the application load balancer. Application load balancer will go to the your application. And now user will log in your application user social media account. But how and on which layer user will authenticate? Whether the user will authenticate in the cloud formation layer, CloudFront layer, or ALB layer, or directly in the application layer. Where? Validate the users by inspecting the token in AWS Lambda authorizer on the ALB. Looks wrong. Configure the ALB to use Amazon Cognito to use one of the authentication providers. So they said, okay, let's pass to the CloudFront, and as soon as they come to the application load balancer, before routing to the request to the application, let's authenticate the user using Cognito. Cognito is our authentication service. All right, so this looks correct. Configure CloudFront to use Amazon Cognito. They said, let's configure the Cognito onto the CloudFront. But is this possible? No. Validate the user by calling the Amazon Cognito API in the AWS Lambda. This looks wrong. So correct answer is B. And I can show you. Let me show you. If I go to the EC2 and if I show you the load balancer, let me show you the load balancer. And if you see here, uh, here we have configured authenticate using Cognito. So in the load balancer, you can authenticate using Cognito, and we have created some user pool, and only those particular users are like can access the particular thing. Okay, so You have to configure the Cognito into the application load balancer, not in the cloud front. Question number 8. A company has an application that analyzes photographs. So there is some application, and application is trying to analyze some photographs. A developer is preparing the application for deployments to Amazon EC2. So that particular application developer is trying to deploy into Amazon EC2. Okay. The application image analyze function require a mix of GPU and CPU instance. So they said, okay, the developer wants to deploy the application on Amazon EC2, but the application sometimes require GPU, sometimes require CPU. So the how the developer needs to add code to the function so that the function can determine whether they are running on a GPU instance. What should the what should the function do to obtain this information? So let's read the question again. A company has an application that analyze photographs. Okay, and the developer is preparing the application for deployment to Amazon EC2. Okay, the application image analysis functions. So there are some function require a mix of GPU instances and CPU instances that run on Amazon Linux. The developer needs to add code to the application so that the function can determine whether they are running on a GPU instance. What should the function do to obtain this information? So they said in that they are running some, they are preparing currently application, and you want to help them to write the code, and they want to implement some logic so that they can figure it out whether the application is running on the GPU or they are running on the CPU. All right, because once the application is going to start it, how the code is going to know where I am running? I am running on the CPU, I am running on the GPU. All right. So one option is call the describe instance API and filter the current instance ID, examine the elastic GPU. So generally, if you have to figure it out uh, on the particular EC2, whether the CPU is there or GPU is there, you have to get the information on the particular EC2 or some kind of a metadata information, right? So this could be one of the option. Evaluate the GPU available environment variable. So there is no such environment variable. B is wrong. Call the describe elastic GPU API operation. So this looks wrong because they said elastic GPU. Elastic GPU are the extra GPU, right? But here they are not talking about the elastic GPU. They are not talking about the normal GPU and the CPU. Retrieve the instance type from the instance metadata. So A and D both looks correct, but D is straightforward because we have the metadata URL. You can just call the request.get and that to the metadata URL, and whatever the response will come, you will just check, okay, whether it has a GPU parameter or not. So D will be the correct answer. So let me reveal the answer. D will be the correct answer. Let me show you. So though we can, but this approach is unnecessary. And so this is the URL. You can check that. Okay, and then you will figure it out. Okay, of which family it is P3, G3, G5, whatever it is. Question number 9. A company has an application, okay, that uses Amazon Cognito user pool as an identity provider. Okay, so what is the use of Amazon Cognito? Just to authenticate the users. And company has an application, that application already using that. The company must secure access to user record. Okay, the company has set up a MFA. The company also want to send a login activity notification by email every time a user login. So what they want is in the Cognito as soon as uh, because they are the Cognito application, right? So not the Cognito application, some application which has the Cognito functionality available. As soon as the user login, right, and it immediately, you can say, trigger some kind of a email a notification. All right, how you can do that? So this is inbuilt functionality into the Amazon Cognito. I think I already implemented this in one of my video. So if you go to the Cognito, I think this is the inbuilt create user pool. So option for sign in, like how the option will be signed, it's required attribute for sign up. Uh, there is, I think, I remember there is a one one options. Let me show you authentication methods. There is some options, social and external providers. Okay, so create an AWS Lambda function that uses simple notification, simple email service to send the email notification. So this looks correct. We need to create a Lambda function which is going to call the simple, which is going to send some email. Add an API gateway API to invoke the function. Call the API from the client side when login information is received. Uh, Not actually, because I remember in the Cognito we have inbuilt functionality when we are setting up the Cognito. You can there are some settings you can do that settings. Okay, as soon as that particular layer is going to pass, after the user is login, after the user is sign up, after user is sign in, right? So this kind of thing, you can trigger something, right? So basically you can maybe invoke some lambda. So create a AWS lambda function that uses simple email service. And but when that lambda function will be called, so that lambda function will be called add an image post authentication. As soon as the authentication will be done, the lambda function will be triggered. So B will be the correct answer. So you CloudWatch logs wrong. Create a lambda, the imagine Chrissy data firehouse wrong. So B looks the correct answer. Question number 10. A company hosts a three-tier web application on AWS behind a cloud front. So you have the users, you have the Amazon cloud front, and after that cloud front, you have the three-tier web application. Three-tier web application. A developer wants a dashboard. So developer wants a dashboard to monitor error rates and anomalies of the CloudFront distribution, so that the with the shortest possible refresh interval. So they said, I want a dashboard so that as soon as any error come into the CloudFront, it should be available into the dashboard, and probably in the real time, because it says shortest possible refresh interval. So what two option the developer should take to implement this? Okay, activate real-time logs on CloudFront distribution. Create a stream in Amazon Kinesis data stream. Okay, they said like whenever uh, you generate the logs, just send into the Kinesis data stream, which is the real time, or export the logs to the S3 bucket and then go to the quick. So this looks wrong, because once you go to the S3 bucket and then from the S3 bucket you are going to the quick site. So this is not a real time. Configure Kinesis data stream to deliver logs to the OpenSearch service. This looks okay, because the dashboard, how you are going to see the dashboard. So there is an OpenSearch service, Kibana dashboard, right? So you can create a dashboard there, but you have to send the logs to the OpenSearch. So you can send the logs from the Kinesis data stream, but how you can get the log to the Kinesis data stream? By first option. So A and C looks okay. Create Amazon CloudWatch alarm. Why we need alarm? Design an Amazon CloudWatch dashboard of the selected cloud fund distribution metrics. No. So A and C looks correct. So A and C looks correct. So we have covered 10 questions, right? And this video already very long. So in the next video, maybe we are going to cover the next 10 questions. So that's it. That's the end of the video, and thank you.